BookTube. Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. It's time for our literary update number 7. But first, before I start talking about the literature, I finally watched something that I was actually into other than Frozen 2, and that was the new reboot of Charmed. I had watched the first couple episodes when it first came on the air, and I thought they were okay at the time. They were kind of interesting, a little quirky. There were things of it that were a little, off-putting, the White Liner character going as disappearing act. Leo on Charm, the original Charm, Leo's disappearing and reappearing was a little more whimsical and sparkly and stuff, and this one was a little more sci-fi, which it's fine, nothing's wrong with it. It's just a little off-putting at first. But, I think it helps that I didn't have to wait a week for the next episode. I was able to binge watch the first 6. I think I got to episode 6. 6 episodes. Or, actually, I guess I should say I got to episode 7. But I stopped watching after episode 7, and, because it was getting late. But it's actually pretty good, and it does help, and as I just said, it helps that I was able to binge it. But yeah, for the longest time, I would watch other stuff, but I just wasn't as interested in it as I was in watching another, replaying Frozen 2. And I'm still listening to it on my, I downloaded it on my, iTouch, which is my iPod, my iTouch as in my iPod, I'm using as an iPod, so I have 2 iTouches. I have, my regular phone that I've had for a few years now, and then I have this iTouch, which I'm using as my iPod. So I don't have anything except for music on there. And I have a few of the songs on there. I currently do not have a, what those cards are called. Those cards where you download the music. It's the money, and then you use that money to download to get the music. I don't have any of those. I don't have a lot of money, so I decided to just get a few of the songs that I really, really like, that were my favorites. Although I love all the songs on Frozen 2. And so I'm still listening to the songs in there and almost got them memorized. I've been working on, remembering the lyrics and stuff. I still can't sing it as well as Adina or Kristen, because I can't sing. My sister will probably do it. But yeah, this new Charmed is pretty cool, and they're trying to be more diverse with their cast of characters. Although I don't know if it's because there were I was watching on Netflix, so no commercials, but the episodes seemed to go up really fast. They would have the conflict. They would introduce the characters and the situation in the episode, and then the conflict would get really bad, and there might be some tension amongst the group, and then the big fight with the whatever evil thing would happen, and then they would resolve it. Everything. They have the cute sentimental moment between the sisters, and so they're already doing the whole half-sister storyline that they had with Paige, which I don't have any particular problem with that. I think that's cool that they're doing that. And they have, and I'm guessing the character of Parker, I don't remember what my friend Jessica said, that she said, there was a character that was kind of like Cole in the story, was this version's their equivalent to Cole Turner. So I'm guessing Parker, I think that would be Parker, but I'm not sure. I have to look back on Jessica's comments on Facebook. And they also are doing the whole, in the original show, Phoebe was they kind of implied that Phoebe could go either way. She could be either evil or really good. And she, has a dark side, so they're doing that with the half-sister character, with her having a dark side. The last episode we watched is that arc is starting. That arc was introduced. So I think that's really, I kind of like that whole idea of the character that treads the line between good and evil. Characters that have a darkness in them. but they also, like, they're struggling with being good, between good and evil. Which, that's probably one of the reasons why I love Rumpelstiltskin, though, Once Upon a Time so much, is he kind of treaded the line. Unfortunately, and to be fair, it's only going by what I heard, because after season 3 I stopped watching. So, but I did hear that they flip-flop a lot with the character, and basically I feel like he was either really, 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 really bad and really evil, like almost cartoonish even, or he was like someone that was just kind of pathetic in a way. And now, like I said, I stopped after season 3, so, fine, you can judge me all you want and say, how would you know, you didn't watch it or anything, but I'm going by what I heard. But anyway, but I liked what they established with his character in season 1. And then they were kind of falling apart. At least I personally feel like they were falling apart in season 2 with his character. Like, I was wanting to give it a shot, and I lasted for as long as I did, but then I'm surprised I lasted as long as I did, because they did one plot that I personally have a hatred for, trope, which is the amnesia trope. That's a little too, I just cannot stand that trope. I despise it. The other tropes I can tolerate the other tropes, and as a lot of people have said in the past, that, whether it's a book or a movie or a TV show, certain tropes can be, as long as if they're done well, they can be okay. But to me, the amnesia plot, I don't see how that can be done in a way that's, like, or at least have the amnesia not last that long. Like, maybe last only an episode, and then the person suddenly remembers. Like, or at least don't drag it out for too long anyway. At least, if it's more realistic to drag it on for a few episodes, fine. Just drag it on for a few episodes. But a few, as in 3 episodes, maybe 3 or 2. But don't drag it on the whole half of the season. Or at least don't have the character treat the love interest like they're a monster and, oh, they're traumatizing me or whatever. It's like, all he did was give her a little teacup and was insisting that she, and maybe, I don't know. It's like, I feel like they went about it all wrong on the show. But I better stop, because I'm in danger of ranting about that show again, and I could easily rant about that show. So let's get to talking about the literature. So, I am almost done with Full Dark, No Stars, which is, I think, the second collection I've ever completed of his short stories or novellas. Because technically, I have not completed 4 Past Midnight. I've read 2 of the stories. I read The Long Letters years ago, and then I have seen the movie based on Secret Window, Secret Garden, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I know the plot, so what's the point of, reading the book? I know what's going to happen and stuff, and I just can't, every time I've attempted to read it, I just can't get into it, because I already know what's going to happen. And it's a short story that it feels like there's not going to be any, or novella where it feels like there's not going to be really any surprises for me. I can't help but think like that, because I've seen the movie, and I know that on-screen adaptations are different from the original book material, but if it's I feel like if it's a novella or short story, they'll get pretty close to accurate to what the whole plot is. Maybe there will be some differences, but it's a short enough story. It's an actual short story or a novella that I feel like it wouldn't be that much different. Maybe a little bit, because they don't want it to be a carbon copy of what people read on the page, and there's just some things they can't do on screen in adaptations, or things that won't translate well on screen. So I just, and I just can't get into it. And then I know I want to reread The Long Letters, because I read it so long ago, so I don't know when I'll ever get around to it, but I do want to. And then the only one I think I've read all the way through is Everything's Eventual, which is a collection of 14 dark tales. And they're short stories, so they're pretty easy to get through. And I think, other than that, I haven't really completed any of his collections. I think this is the only one I probably will complete. But I am going to donate. These are good stories. I love, I'm a fan of King, and, I don't love everything by him. In fact, I just made a comment to Daniel Green's video about that, where I was asking if there's a book that's kind of connected to The Dark Tower that I'm wondering if I should really read it. And I'm wondering what he's gonna. I'm kind of curious if he responds or not, because he's one of those popular YouTube/BookTube channels. So I don't even know if I'll see my comment, because mine is probably out of millions of comments to him, and and if he did respond, I don't know if he's going to say that it's important enough that you should read it because it kind of gives you an idea, or if, it's like, oh no, you don't have to read it, you can still figure out what's, but the one I'm talking about particularly introduces a character from The Dark Tower. So there was like kind of a like, should I read it? Is it necessary or not? But, yeah, I commented on his video that I admitted that, yeah, I'm not interested in everything that Stephen King writes. Like, I have no interest in his Mr. Mercedes series because I just don't like police procedural, following some, serial killer storylines. I have no interest. I'm interested in watching, like, documentaries, on some of those special channels that talk about it, like ID or something, but that's it. I don't want to read about it. I don't care for those kinds of stuff. I think it's kind of boring. And I do lean more heavily towards his more supernatural stories, or stories that have supernatural elements. Like, I'm one of those few people that I think doesn't have a problem with if it's, so far it seems like a regular story, and then all of a sudden, bam, supernatural element is in there, is involved. Like, I think that's one of the criticisms The Outsider received, which I don't know, so I feel like I'm not really spoiling anything because I haven't read it, and I don't know what the supernatural element is, but I do believe that it turns out there is a supernatural element in the story. And I think that's one of the criticisms that people, that book received, is they don't like that all of a sudden it seemed like a regular, like, mystery, thriller story, and then all of a sudden there's actually something supernatural going on. But I like it. But this does not have supernatural elements. I still like it, and these are still good stories. Like, and I feel like I can say, even though I'm not finished with them, I'm on the last one anyway, so there's 4 stories altogether, so I've read like 3 of the stories, and there's just one more, and I already started that one, and it sounds pretty good so far. But in this case, there's really no supernatural elements. It's just regular human monsters, and no supernatural powers, no fangs, no claws, no nothing, just regular people being selfish and greedy, and showing their darker sides. And I feel like there's a heavy focus on, like, the 7 deadly sins, like lust and greed and anger. But maybe you just get that with all horror works. Like, all the sins that create all those negative emotions inside of you. So maybe I'm just reading too much into it and just trying to be all, like, smart and be like, oh, it's talking about the 7 deadly sins, and it's really just horror, highlighting the horrors of humanity. Like, the first one involves a husband and wife and their son. He's a Nebraska farmer, but the land legally belongs to his wife because it was her grandfather's land, but she doesn't really care about it like her husband does, and her husband Wilf does. So he decides the only solution to dealing with his wife and wanting to sell the land is if he murders her, and he's forced to persuade his son to go along with the plan, and he kind of manipulates him and tells him that, oh, she'll ruin your life. She'll take you away from your girlfriend, who you're starting, and your friends and everything. And he's kind of playing on his emotions a little bit. And of course, because he's a good, wholesome little young man, and he's only 14, and he does love his mother, he is hesitant to do it. It's the last thing he really wants to do in the end. He only wants to do it if there's no other choice. And to the point where the father has to, like, he says that Wilf is like, well, I will resign to the fact if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But he does get his wife really drunk one night, and she starts talking vulgarly to her son about his relationship with his girlfriend, and that's the last straw for their son Henry. And he decides to help his father kill her. But even then, he's still like, he keeps feigning throughout the whole experience because you're murdering your mom. That's not something that you can just be stone cold about. And it basically ruins their lives. It ruins his relationship with his father forever. And he ends up resorting to the comfort of his girlfriend and gets her pregnant. And her parents are not very happy about that. And I did keep forgetting that it was set in the 20s. It's 1922, and I kept forgetting because I kept picturing them dressed like how modern day 21st century farmers would dress. I kept forgetting it's historical. It's a pretty good. It's kind of gruesome. It's very gruesome, and like King, of course, being a guy that's a thing for rats. There's a rats in the story, and there is like a suggestion of the supernatural, but I think it's not really in there. Like the character is kind of going a little nuts, and he thinks it's real, but it's it's one of these things where in this case it's obvious that he's just hallucinating and seeing things and it's not real, especially by the end of the story, how it ends. I had fun doing because I did read a little bit of it out loud, because I had a booktube video on in the background, so I was kind of trying to, distract myself from it, and it was a vlog video, so I felt like, oh, it's okay, because on vlogs, there are times when booktubers are just kind of doing stuff, but they're not talking, so, and so I read out loud and kind of tried to do a little bit of a southern accent, and I had fun with that, even if it was really bad, and I couldn't differentiate any of the characters. I tried to make the boy's voice a little higher pitched, and tried to make some of the other characters have more gruffer voices than others. But I probably, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the characters. But so I don't have any strong feelings. It was good. It was interesting. It really looked at how greed can alter can bring out your darker desires, and your desperation to make sure you get what you want, even if it means murder. It's a really weird, it's a really creepy, weird situation, but not scary as in like it or something, or Needful Things. And then the second story, Big Driver, is one of the hardest stories to read, I think. Now, I don't know about it. Like I said, I'm still working on the last one, A Good Marriage, so who knows. But this one involves a middle-aged woman, she's between my age and Terry and my sister's age. She's in her 30s, and she's a semi-known author, and she's invited to an event at a local library where she speaks about her book and all the how those things go, and it goes really well. And then the woman who hosted, Ramona Norville, tells her of a shortcut she can take to get home that will get her home faster. But she ends up running over some stuff that puts a hole in her tires, or her car breaks down, and she's forced to get help from this forced to stop somewhere to get some help. And this guy, this real big truck driver, offers to help her. But and even though he changes her tire, what ends up happening is he also decides, I'm gonna rape you. And how about I do that instead? And he, attacks her, and she's going in and out of consciousness, and he leaves her for dead. So it is really traumatizing for her, which obviously, the fact that a woman who was not expecting gets raped. And what ends up happening is she decides to, after she finally gets home, she decides that she's going to take matters into her own hands, and instead of doing the quote-unquote rational thing and go to the police and report it, she decides to take matters into her own hands and get revenge. But this revenge plan gets very complicated and involves a lot of people. So the hardest part of this particular story was reading the rape scene, because it's a little bit detailed. And this is King, though. It's not like super, like, it's not like a reading a manual detail, but it's very, you're getting the emotions and lots of vulgar language because it's King after all. He doesn't shy away. And it's so hard to watch this woman, especially a woman that's close to my age, experiencing this, or close to my friends, my best friends, or my sister's age, seeing them going through, imagining what if they went through this. Luckily, all of us have been very fortunate that not to experience it, but the fact that it's someone close to my age going through this is kind of scary to think about. And the woman, our main character, Tessa, is slowly you can see her going a little crazy because after experiencing such horrible trauma, how it affects her mental state. And in the beginning, she's very paranoid that he's going to show up again and find her, which, you can't blame her. I mean, and every time, like, she's walking along the highway because he leaves her alone in the middle of the road in this sewage system or whatever, and thinking that she's dead, and she's walking along the highway covered up in, like, nothing but a carpet, and every time she sees a car, she, like, runs and hides because she thinks, what if it's him? What if he's come back for me? And there's, like, she even starts talking to herself at one point, and, she even imagines that her cat and this dog that she comes across and her GPS, her form of GPS, is communicating with her. Like, they're her conscience. They're reflecting her inner thoughts. So, it's her only way to deal with the situation is to pretend like she's talking to someone else. So she's not alone, even if it's an animal or, like, a machine that she's talking to. She feels like, I think it's a comfort to her. And it's a reassurance that she's not completely alone in this. But this one is very hard to read. I mean, even when I was telling Terry about this collection, and said I was almost finished with it, she's like, as soon as I mentioned that one, and telling her how hard it was to read that one, and she's like, yeah, I don't read stories about that. She's not comfortable with reading that kind of stuff, and I don't blame her. I definitely would not be comfortable with reading something like, obviously I did read it, but I don't blame her, and I imagine a lot of women would not be comfortable reading a story about that. That's why I'm probably never going to read Fredrik Backman's, the one about the ice hockey team, and there's, like, I can't remember what it's called, but essentially it's about that too, and how this rape divides their small town to the point of some people will probably say, oh, she asked for it, or they don't believe her, and then there's some people who are defending the girl, and, and also I think it's a member of the hockey team, and hockey is their thing, like, their sport. How a lot of small towns have the big football team that they can get away with anything, and, that as long as they're good at football, they'll get into college, even if they're not smart. It's kind of that situation. I probably will never read that book because it's a whole novel about this, and it would just make me upset, and I want to read to and be, like, escape. I don't want to deal with something that's a little too close to home. Not that I've ever, luckily, like I said, I've never experienced it, and I don't know anyone who has, but I think I had a friend who had a family member who did experience it, which probably, but I'm not 100% sure. And then the third story is the shortest one, and it's about this guy, this middle-aged man, named Dave Streeter, and he has cancer, and he is has a wife and kids, so his life isn't terrible, but he's not satisfied with it, and the fact that he has cancer doesn't help either. And he meets this average guy who seems somewhat nice, decent. He's a bit of he refers to himself as a businessman, and he's like, he offers a deal. He offers to get rid of Dave's cancer, but of course you can't get something from nothing, and Dave has to pick someone that he absolutely hates to suffer the consequences of his choice. And he actually picks his best friend. because he is actually jealous of his best friend, and his best friend stole his girlfriend back in the day. His best friend, has his own business, and he's doing really well. He has kids he's good looking, he's an athlete. He has kids, a son that looks exactly like him. So of course he's also Mr. Star athlete and stuff, and the kids are doing really well, and he has a great relationship with them. And the kids, like, he mentions at one point how he's kind of annoyed that his son still kisses his dad on the cheek. Like, I imagine Dave's kids don't want anything to do with him, maybe, or don't show affection that much towards their dad. And so Dave makes a deal, not taking it seriously, thinking the guy's just crazy, that he's escaped from Juniper Hills, which is one of the asylums in Derry. The book takes place in Derry. The short story takes place in Derry. And he ends up, but then he starts showing signs of his cancer going away, which kind of surprises him. And then his doctor, and then his friend, everything starts falling apart in his life. He doesn't get cancer, but like his wife gets cancered. His kids fail in life. There's an accident with and they all end up living back at home. And something happens to each one of them. And when Dave starts to realize, well, maybe this guy was legit and he really can do this, he's like, well, fair is fair. I have a good life now with my wife, so, that's how life is. It's fair, it's only fair that, because he was always constantly helping Dave do better in school and stuff. His friend, Dave was constantly helping his friend get really successful and have a good life. And so it was very interesting. It was the one I got through the fastest. I read it in one sitting. And it's just very interesting. And so far, it's my favorite one because, of course, like I said earlier, I like Stephen King's more supernatural stories. Stories have a supernatural element. And because it takes place in Derry, first I was looking for all the references to it. And there's a reference to when the guy is asking him, who's someone that you hate, he mentions that he gets kind of annoyed by Miss Denbrough, which, if you know, that's Bill's last name, so I'm wondering if she is Bill's mom or something. And there's, he references the flood that happened in the 80s, which is what happens at the end of it. There's this giant flood that the whole town gets flooded. Unless he's talking about, there was a flood also in the 50s. In fact, that's how Georgie ends up getting taken by Pennywise. Because he's driving his little paper boat through the little stream of water. So I don't know which. I assume that it was the 80s, but it could very well be the 50s. I would have to look back and check. Because I was trying to figure out I was also trying to figure out where on the timeline when does this happen in the story? Does it happen after the events of it, or during the events of it, or before the events of it? And I think it was in the 90s, or actually I think it would have to be the 80s. The flood he's referring to, the one in the 80s, because he says it destroyed most of the town, and the book takes place in the early 2000s. The present is in the early 2000s, so and there's a reference to the character that makes the deal, that he makes the Faustian deal with, is watching Inside Edition. It's one of those special programs that talks about the history of a certain crime and stuff like that. Like I said, that was the shortest one. I got through that quickly. And like I said, the last one is called A Good Marriage, and so far we're introduced to this couple that have an okay marriage, not bad, and the husband is mildly successful, and she ends up, while he's on a business trip, she discovers the magazines that her catalogs, because he's always accusing her of buying too many stuff from the catalog, and she says she doesn't, so he hides her catalogs, and then she discovers a weird catalog, and a weird magazine in there that has some, BDSM type stuff on it, and she just is trying to ignore it, and the weird thing is there's no price tag or anything on it, and my theory is that he's making that kind of stuff, and he's putting it together like a magazine. and selling it, or something like that. That's my theory of what we're gonna find out. And the wife, I think she's gonna go a little crazy because I mean this is Stephen King. So I'm gonna finish this today, and I don't know. I'll let you know at some point if I'm correct in my assumption. I'll put this down because my. So I'm also reading this one. I'm finally reading Time of Contempt, and so far it's pretty good. The characters have been, there's like war is still looming in this world. The Witcher is traveling. Like it starts with him taking care of a monster, as usual, and business as usual. Ciri is with Yennefer, and Yennefer is trying to send Ciri to this special school, but that's the last thing Ciri wants because she doesn't want them to get rid of her. She wants to be with Yennefer and Geralt all the time, and she ends up. And her powers are slowly, being, what she's capable of, slowly being revealed. Like, at one point, her, like, while Yennefer is having a private conversation with this banker, she is being escorted by this boy named Fabio through the town where the special school is, where Yennefer wants to send her, and, taking a tour of the town, and they come across this one of those, their version of, like, one of those, where, like, you present something really weird and astonishing, and, like, see the first blah blah blah, and the guy claims that he's the basilisk, which, if you read Harry Potter, you know what the basilisk is, and, he presents the creature, and Ciri's in there watching with Fabio, and, which I think that name is hilarious, Fabio, and she realizes it's not a basilisk. It is actually a wyvern. I don't know, because I don't know how you're supposed to say it. I mean, like, I always thought it was worm, but then a lot of people pronounce it as, I've heard a lot of people say wyvern, and it looks like wyvern the way it's spelled. But for some, I was thinking it was a worm for some reason, or like that's how you pronounce it. But anyway, she calls up this guy and is all like, it's a wyvern and everything, and he's like, well, prove it then, if you're so smart, you little kid, you little shit. And she takes him, so she approaches it in the cage, and then it ends up getting out and starts attacking the people in this facility. And Ciri, who doesn't want to get caught, is afraid of getting caught, escapes. And with Fabio, but all the townsfolk are like, it's her fault. A lot of the townsfolk are like, it's her fault. Let's go get the little brat. And but she barely, like, escapes on horseback and ends up getting attacked by the Wild Hunt, who claim, you're one of us, come with us, join us, and they're really creepy. And Geralt and Yennefer finally find her, because she left a note for Yennefer when she is reunited with Yennefer. I just call her Jennifer. It's Yennefer. And she was like, after Yennefer, okay, rewind. So first, after the whole incident in the little performance where she called it the Wyvern, Yennefer and the people of the school find her, and first they think she's one of their students already, so they try to take her, but Yennefer shows up and rescues her, and there's the women are talking in one of those big pool, hot tub type things, and Ciri's had enough, it doesn't want to hear this, and she takes off to go find Geralt. And that's when she escapes, when she escapes the town and is like, I'm gonna, go find Geralt. And Geralt and Yennefer finally catch up to her, both find her after she is confronted by the Wild Hunt, who comes to claim her. And as a present, I don't know where Ciri is right now, but Yennefer and Geralt are going to the special sorcerer's dinner, and he's running to all these people who want to meet him and are intrigued by him, and all the female sorcerers want to talk to him and hit him up and, like, want to do it with him. And of course Yennefer is like, all territory is like, nope, you're not, he's mine, you can't have him. And of course Geralt is so uncomfortable because these are beautiful, powerful women who can use their magic on him and give him magical aphrodisiacs and everything, and just they're talking about him in very provocative ways. So it's kind of a very funny scene, just seeing all these girls talking about him and hating on Yennefer because, Yennefer's laid claim to him and everything. It just gets really catty with them. So far it's really interesting. I'm really liking it. I know that I think both Daniel Green and Elliot Brooks said they didn't really like this one as much, which I don't know how I'm going to feel about it, but so far I'm liking it. So far I disagree with them, but it's pretty good, and I do not know. I don't know what's going to happen next. But and then I finally read another chapter of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. And so David Copperfield is this little boy, or it starts with he's a little boy, and it's him and his mom and this woman who's kind of like his mom's servant, Pegani, and they raise David and everything, David Copperfield, and, give him a good life and stuff, and or at least he thinks it's a pretty good life. But then his mom starts showing interest in the Met and, wanting a new guy in her life. But Pegani and David are not so keen on this guy, and he's not the most nicest guy. He pretends to be nice, but then he kind of doesn't treat David with kindness or respect. I mean, it's not really obvious, but he's very condescending towards David, and he has this mentality of, she's spoiling the boy and treating him nice, and you gotta be hard on him and tough on him. And so Pegani decides to take David with her to see her family, and he has a really good time there, and he meets this girl named Emily, and who's like, I think she's like a cousin to Pegani or something, and he falls in love with her in the way that a boy his age would fall in love with, the only way that they would know how. But he eventually has to go back, and it makes him very sad and upset, and then when he gets back to his mom, he finds that she's married to this guy. Oh, Murdoch or something? Murstone or something. And like I said, the guy's not very nice. He's very condescending, and and there's one point where David is all upset because he's had to leave Emily, and they find him crying because he's heartbroken that he had to leave the girl, and his mom accuses Pegani of turning her son against her, and which she already did once in the story, and just giving, how dare you take my son from me? And Pegani's just like, no, I'm trying to, because she does not like how his mom is, being with this gentleman and how she's trusting him and everything. I think Pegani's a little suspicious of the guy, and she's not trying to turn David against her. She just knows that you can't trust this guy, and maybe she's making the wrong choices with being with this gentleman and marrying him and stuff. And of course he shows up and is like, you're not being hard enough on the boy, and you need to be tough on him. And essentially, when his mom and Pegani leave David and the man alone, he's like, basically tells him, how I treat my horses and my animals. If they don't obey me, I beat them. And basically implying that he's saying, if you're not careful, I'm gonna beat you too. Basically implying that he's gonna, because, that he's probably going to spank David if he's not a good little boy. And the last thing I read was, before I started to fall asleep, was that the guy's sister is coming now, and we don't know how we feel about her. I don't know how I feel about her. I'm guessing she's a very ominous figure, because the last couple sentences, I don't remember what was said, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't positive. And I know from the movie trailer he's gonna end up on the street or something, in that he's gonna be found by this one dude who, in the movie, he is played by Peter Capaldi. And I'm wondering if that's the brother or something of Pegani or something. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell if you haven't read the book and you're not familiar with the plot. So I'm going to find out. And then once I finish it, I will watch that movie at some point. Who knows? But I haven't got very far. I'm also using those bookmarks that Terry gave me. The space ones. So that is what's going on. Like I said, I'm going to finish Full Dark No Stars today, and then I'm going to read a little bit of David Copperfield. I want to read a good chunk of it, and then I need to read Time of Contempt again this evening. But I just want to, as always, I just like updating you guys on what's going on. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell notification below if you want to see when I post new videos. And I hope you're enjoying your reading, and I will talk to y'all later. All right, bye!